Oh, okay. Well, let's go through a few acronyms first before we get on, because I work in a world of government now, and they live and die by the acronyms. CFFG, that stands for the Coastal Fish Forestry Guidelines. Those were guidelines used in 1988 to 1994 to regulate logging around streams. It essentially became the riparian aspects of the Forest Practices Code, which is FPC. That was legislation enabled for almost a 10-year period, 1995 to 2003. Very, very prescriptive approach to forest harvesting in BC. It's been replaced by the Forest and Range Practices Act, FREP we call it, and it's been in place since 2004. It's a results-based type of legislation, which does encourage some innovation in riparian management, but it does have a requirement that they provide clear strategy for achieving that management and for monitoring and assessing the effectiveness of that management. That's been a bit of a stumbling block, so we haven't necessarily seen a lot of progress down that road yet. The bottom acronym, which was FREP, F-R-E-P, stands for Forest and Resource Evaluation Program. That's a monitoring program that the government is using to monitor the effectiveness of FERPA in achieving the stewardship objectives of FERPA. I just want to go through a few acknowledgements. This is very much a collaborative effort with a lot of the agencies. They're all listed here. There's also representatives from UBC and Canadian Forest Products as well. There was a lot of people involved in here. I just want to mention three in particular. That's Peter Czaplinski, Dan Hogan, and Steve Bird. Peter Czaplinski just wrote a report on the results to date of FREP and the data collected with the Riparian Riparian Assessment Protocol. Dan Hogan and Steve Bird, these are geomorphologists out of Vancouver, and they worked quite extensively with us developing a lot of our indicators and defining what constituted the natural limits of variability for those indicators. A brief review of streamside management in BC before 1956. Before 1956, there really was no streamside management. Logging around streams was basically controlled by cutting permits, and if there was ever any mention of streams on there, it was only at the extreme request of an agency like DFO. So streams were logged basically to the stream edge at all times back in the old days. Streams, if they were used for anything, they would be used as, sometimes access, some place to dispose, slash and timber, or even to transport logs down there. So that's a long time ago now. From 1956 to about 1972, I think, they instituted an interagency referral system. So there's a lot more interaction with the agencies, putting constraints onto the cutting permits, but basically it was still no buffer zones, basically logging to the stream edge. From 1972 right up to 1995, when the code was enabled, there was basically an explosion not only in the scale of logging in BC, but a lot more knowledge and studies initiated to look at the impacts of forest harvesting. Generally in the Pacific Northwest, our knowledge of fish forestry impacts just took off. There's something like 225 studies since early 1950s, mid-1950s. And over 1,000 peer-reviewed papers. Guidelines, as a result of all this extra knowledge, just proliferated. There's guidelines for everything, for road construction, for harvesting, and for streamside management as well. Agency interactions intensified. There was a lot of infighting, trying to get some agreement on it. But at the end of the day, it was still basically narrow strips of deciduous trees left behind. That was probably still the most common strategy in BC. It wasn't the only thing. I don't want to give the impression that every stream was logged to the stream edge, but there were an awful lot, and usually the largest streams got logged to the stream edge. We'll start here. Riparian Management Areas, as I alluded to earlier. Every stream in BC still requires a riparian reserve zone, which is a no-cut harvest zone and this is for fish-bearing streams larger than 1.5 meters. And this buffer zone ranges anywhere from 20 to 50 meters wide. It's kind of written in stone that it has to be at least that, but if there's any other topographic features to take into account, then the buffers are to be extended to that point. So these are just minimum widths when I talk about 20 to 50 meters. On the outside of every riparian reserve zone or no harvest zone, there's a management zone. And this sometimes is the area that you do leave behind to take it to the topographic break of a fluvial slope, or just to preserve the riparian reserve zone from something like wind throw. All the other streams in BC don't have any no-cut buffer zones, and these are the small fish streams, 1.5 meters, which apparently you consider fairly large, but we are generally considering them small. And all non-fish bearing streams of any width, they don't require any reserve zones either. They have management zones that just vary, again, from 20 to 30 meters, depending on local conditions. Obviously, if you have some terrain instability, the logging, they may not harvest at all within that management zone. They may even extend them well beyond 30 meters. This is just a table summarizing again the widths, and it also just shows stream classes running down the left-hand side. They're S1 to S6, S1 to S4 are all fish-bearing, S5 and 6 are non-fish bearing. And you can see, looking at the columns on the right, just the dimensions that they use, and these are just basically considered minimum dimensions. This was the regime that forest companies operated under on the Forest Practices Code. Under FREP, if they don't come up with any other kind of strategy that they can, clearly articulate and describe how they're going to monitor and assess effectiveness, this is kind of still the default. But if they come up with any kind of a strategy, they can certainly modify this approach. This is a pretty interesting slide here. In fact, I had to write it all out because it got pretty complicated to me. It shows what effects the Forest Practice Code, which came in 1995, had on the condition of streams in or beside blocks in BC. It also shows how effective the guidelines were compared to legal requirements. So those tall blue bars are the percentage of streams by stream class in the Coastal Fish Forestry Guideline audit that were deemed not to be in proper functioning condition. The actual words I used in the report were streams with a major or moderate impact. Numbers by stream class range from, on the left, about 5% all the way up to about 80% of the streams. That worked out to about 1 out of every 2 streams would have a major or moderate impact on them. Now, we looked at compliance, we looked at effectiveness, and we found that guidelines actually were effective when they were followed. Trouble was they weren't always recommended. They didn't have to be recommended. And when they were recommended, they weren't always followed. I mean, after all, they were guidelines. So what happened then? Well, the government at the time basically took the Coastal Fish Forestry Guidelines and made them a legal requirement, and that became the Forest Practices Code. A few years after the code was enabled, Forest Practice Board went in and basically replicated the Coastal Fish Forestry Guideline audit. And they found there was actually a substantial reduction in the number of impacts and the degree of impacts present on the streams. Instead of that 5 to 80% range, it now went from 0 to 20%. And I think the average was about somewhere around 12 to 15% in there. That was probably the average number of streams that, on average, would have an impact on it. Still back on this slide here. The green bars, they're the results of the FREP audit, and these are the ones I've been involved in as well throughout BC. Despite different assessment methods, and we do use a different method, and a more province-wide sample, the results were virtually identical to those of the Forest Practice Board. And all I can say about that is that it indicates protection provided to streams by the Forest Practices Code basically remained unchanged. So there was, that's the good side, I guess, of a very prescriptive regime for managing streams, is that you do get some consistency from year to year. Oh, we've talked about properly functioning condition. It's a common range concept. It's not that common in forestry. I just want to go through it quickly for those of you who don't know it. It's the ability of a stream to withstand normal peak flood events without experiencing accelerated soil loss. It's the ability to filter runoff and store and safely release water. That's the sort of the standard description of properly functioning condition. We added to this, we wanted it to include the ability of the stream to maintain connectivity with fish habitats in streams and riparian areas so that these habitats are not lost or isolated. We want to maintain an adequate riparian root network for woody debris supply. Take note that, yeah, I agree with your 10-meter wide strip as far as the woody debris supply. That study after study has shown that. That's all you need. We also wanted to provide shade and reduce bank microclimate change. This is just a description of how we actually go about assessing the properly functioning condition of stream reaches in BC. Every year, we randomly select 5 to 15 cut blocks in each forest district. So there's about 30 forest districts. You can do the math. There's anywhere from 150 to 450 randomly selected sites sampled every year in BC. We pick one homogeneous stream reach equal to 100 meters or 30 channel widths and length, whichever is longest, and it's got to be in or immediately adjacent to the block. We then go to that reach, walk up and down it, and we collect data and observations of anywhere from 60 to 120 stream and riparian attributes along the entire length of that stream. Take that data, then go to a checklist, and we answer, 15 questions about the physical and biological characteristics of the stream. This whole process takes about 2 hours for one experienced person, but I know that teams of 2 and 3 have spent all day trying to figure this thing out because they maybe thought they could do it without any training. Here's the first 5 questions that deal with the channel. It's about channel bed. We try and decide if it's undisturbed. We try to decide if the channel banks are undisturbed, woody debris processes, channel morphology, habitat connectivity, fish cover type diversity. We look at moss on the substrate, see if the substrate is stable, the amount of fine sand-side sediments, and the diversity of benthic invertebrates. The last 6 questions are all about the riparian area. Are trees protected from wind throw? Is soil disturbance minimized? Is the root network okay? Bank microclimate, increase your plants, not just weeds, look at those. And we look at the riparian area as a whole. Just step back and say, listen, does this look okay? This is what we expect within the natural range of variability. Once we've gone through, answered all those 15 questions, the number of no answers we get to those questions, we use that to decide on the condition of proper functioning condition. 0 to 2 no answers, we say, yeah, it's healthy stream, it's a properly functioning condition. And as the number of no answers increases, then obviously health or functioning condition declines. Eventually, at some point, when we get more than 6 no answers, we say the stream is no longer in properly functioning condition. We're not saying it's destroyed in any way, shape, or form. It's just not performing as properly as we should. The last crucial step in our assessment is this. We want to know what caused each no answer. So this little example, a little table at the bottom of our checklist. There's 5 no answers to the questions there. 2, logging, generally just logging, was responsible for 2 of those no answers. Livestock would be responsible for 3 of them. And then 1, a natural event, was responsible for 1 of the no answers, question 5. It could be a beaver dam, it could have been a natural slide, almost anything. The FREP protocol differs from actually a lot of other checklists. We looked at a lot of them. A lot of our checklists just ask a question. And to be honest, you've got to have a lot of experience to answer that question properly. Okay, FREP questions provide measurable indicators that we can go look at and have specific thresholds to help us tell what the answer to the question should be. And these, having these specific thresholds means we actually get very consistent and repeatable assessments for experts and non-experts alike. And we've tested this with teams of 6 teams of 2 with totally different experience levels on 12 streams, and found out we can basically get everybody to within 1 no answer of each other on an assessment, which ranged from, I think, from streams that were totally healthy to streams that had a lot of issues on them. Here's an example of just question 1, our first one in there. We ask, is the channel bed undisturbed? And the 3 indicators we ask is the length of reach with mid-channel bars, the length of the reach with active multiple channels, or the length of the reach with lateral bars, and we ask questions about these. This 50% is our cutoff, so you say yes or no to any one of those questions. You add them all up. Then at the very bottom of the thing, you say, well, how many yes answers there were? If there are 2, you say, yeah, the channel bed is undisturbed. So you can have one indicator suggesting that maybe things aren't all right, but to say no to the answer, we want 2 out of 3 to really say that there's something untoward going on. This is the same question, but it's for step pool streams, so we've divided some of these questions up according to channel morphology. Here we use different indicators because it is a different morphology. We look at moss, a number of boulder lines going across the stream, and again, how many multiple or active channels. Same thing, 2 out of 3, you're okay. Non-alluvial channels, again, we're looking at different things. Channel bed length with moss, space for storage of sediments and debris, sediment distribution. One last example, it's just question 14, it's about increaser plants, weeds and invasive species. And this one is, we don't give it too much leeway. If any one of these gives you a no answer, then we say, yeah, no, these things are not being properly managed for, and the stream is likely not to be in properly functioning condition, at least with regard to this aspect of its characteristics. So our cutoff there for disturbance increasers is 25% of the first 10 meters. That's a lot of dandelions. And 5% for noxious weeds, which is actually quite a few noxious weeds as well. We've got the thresholds from all sorts of sources, but the majority of our channel and in-stream wood indicators come from the work of Dan Hogan and Steve Bird on a study of over 100 logged and unlogged streams in BC. Here's just a map to show you the extent of the coverage. It basically covers all the major physiographic regions of BC and all the major BEC zones. There's only 4 BEC zones not covered, and they represent a very tiny area of BC. There's another 26 streams that you don't see on there on the Haida Gwaii off on the coast, off the west coast of BC. Other checks, existing checklists, we checked on those, anytime we came across a threshold that seemed to be accepted by other agencies and experts, we took that. Other guidebooks in BC, a lot of those guidebooks are based on scientific research spanning 20, 30 years. This is the literature and other specific studies. Basically, we really scrambled to come up with as many defensible thresholds that would represent the range of natural variability as we could. And if we couldn't, we went to expert opinion. That's the last slide. An expert workshop to come up with something we thought would be acceptable to most of our audience and clients. So they tend to be very conservative. Here's a map showing the locations of all of the sites sampled from 2005 to 2008. Excuse me, it says 9, but it's actually 8. There's 1,441 dots on there. So we've got pretty extensive coverage in BC. If you want to know where the logging is, this is a good map to look at. Any area that doesn't have any dots on it, it's probably a park, or there just hasn't been developed yet at all. This is the overall outcomes of our first assessment, and this is basically assessing the condition of streams logged under the Forest Practices Code, because the code went up to 2003, and then there were blocks still being harvested after that were laid out under the code. So overall percentage of streams in not properly functioning condition. So this is the glass half empty in the way of looking at things. 13% provincially when you look at just not properly functioning condition. That's ranged from 10% on interior streams to about 20% on the coastal streams. Not bad. 87% of the streams were something else. So we looked at that something else. We sometimes get very good reviews when we say, oh, 87% of the streams are in one of 3 conditions of properly functioning condition, but one of those conditions is properly functioning condition, but at high risk. And they honestly don't look a whole lot different than a stream that we call not properly functioning. So we collapse those 2 classes and see what the overall percentage of streams is there, and it's 33% provincially, ranging from 30% in the interior to 46% on the coast. So in that case, 33%, not so good, 67% deemed effective in meeting FREP objectives. This is an interesting slide. It's just the what caused the no answers, and I would look down on the very bottom line, the bold line. That's all of the streams, the whole sample, 1,441 streams. The average number of no answers, if you can look at it that way, that we get that are not cut block related was 1.1. So we're saying that's basically the kind of like the background or control condition of streams in BC. When you add in the cut block no related answers, which is 2.5, it comes up to 3.6 no answers. So yes, in the streams we looked at, forest harvesting is causing an increase in the number of no answers and theoretically a decline in the overall functioning condition of the stream. The overall average is actually properly functioning at risk, so it's just a slight degradation when you look at it overall. That was true for all stream classes from S1 to S5. The only one it differed in is S6 streams, where you can see the total number of no answers is 4.2. That pushes it into another category. So it's properly functioning at high risk. Now an S6 stream is a small stream, non-fish bearing. Here's just a picture of a typical S6 stream, basically logged to the stream edge. 4 no answers, probably something to do with eroded stream banks that exceeds what we expect to see naturally. Probably some issues with moss or maybe wood because the stream was maybe cleaned out a little too exuberantly. And then obviously the woody debris supply for that creek might be lacking a little bit. Future woody debris supply at this time. And yeah, the riparian area doesn't really look like you expect to see along any kind of a stream. So that's almost an automatic no when you log the stream edge. This slide compares the mean distance to the harvest edge with stream class, just to show you how much retention on average there is in BC. It isn't a fixed, 20 meters, 30 meters, 40 meters. When you actually take into account all the other constraints that are out there affecting how close you can log the stream, there turns out to be actually quite a bit of retention out there. For S1 streams, S2, S3, these are the ones with mandatory buffers. The average mean width of the no cut or of the buffer left does exceed almost in every case what they actually is legally required. S4 and everything does decline as you go down your stream classes until you hit the S5, which are your large non-fish bearing streams. There the amount of retention goes up again quite a bit just because the valley flats, the floodplains, and the fluvial sidewalls are much wider, much longer. So yeah, they're naturally harder to log and naturally more unstable. So they get a lot more retention. One other thing, the slide before we leave it shows that almost in every case within a stream class, when you reduce the width of the riparian area, you start reducing the properly functioning condition of the stream. So on the bottom line here, as you can see it, I'll just go over, I don't have that. This one right here, these are all the streams in not properly functioning condition, and they also have the least retention on them. So there's a clear relationship between retention and functioning condition. This is a map showing the location of our reference streams. Reference streams are streams that, in our sample of 1,441 streams, actually had very little human activity upstream of it, and they had very wide buffers. So the only really influence there is on these streams is some harvesting some distance away from the stream. So 51 streams out of our 1,441, they're not very common. We've only got what? Way less than 5%, something like 3% of our population. Here's it shows where they are. They're distributed around the province, much like the previous map showed for all the samples. And these are the number of no answers that we got on our reference stream. So the average for all these streams was 1.4 no answers. So it's very close to what Peter Czaplinski reported as non-cut block related no answers, which is 1.1. So that kind of validates that assessment method we use where we're trying to identify what caused the no answer. And just the fact that most of them are all in the 0, 1, and 2 no classes, 3 no classes, and none of them exceed the 6 no class, it kind of supports or validates our scoring system, which has it 0 to 2 is properly functioning condition, and anything over 6 is not properly. So despite the presence of slides, fires, floods, which we did have on several of our streams, none of them actually resulted in a stream being called not properly functioning. As the next steps, we got a ton of data to mine, and we're still going through it. Peter Czaplinski's report is fairly extensive and very, I don't know, illuminating. It's well worth the read. I highly recommend it. If you're looking at just, you know, what is the relationship between, you know, no answers and the causes, like low retention, high retention, also roads. Roads were, in fact, quite a significant factor. I haven't talked about that because that's not my talk. We want to compare riparian condition in FREP blocks now with these results just sort of presented in that that figure I showed you with the bar graphs. We've got a sample now of FREP blocks that are equaling around 450 streams, but we need to analyze it and then compare it to see how that current legislation is stacking up against you know, past surveys. Of course, we'd like to expand the reference stream database and then use that data, because it's very valuable data, to fine-tune our current thresholds with new reference stream data.